Good evening and welcome to all of you. It's a joy for me to be with you and to have you for this webinar. Today is August the 21st. We celebrate the 453rd birth anniversary of our patron and our spiritual master. We are glad today to inaugurate a new venture in our congregation, a webinar on SALES and MERMIER Insights or Dsm Insights. The aim of this webinar is to enlighten us and to educate us in the spiritual and missionary heritage of our congregation and to disseminate the spirituality of St. Francis de Sales. Father Peter Mermier, our venerable founder, presented to us Father or St. Francis de Sales as our patron and as our model. He wanted us to become like Christ, following the example of St. Francis de Sales. Bishop Joseph Ray, while signing the decree and giving the canonical approval for our congregation, he shared his thoughts about who is an MSFS, what is the essence of being an MSFS. He said, MSFS, you should study St. Francis de Sales. You should imitate his virtues. You should follow his method as your own method. That is extreme gentleness and compassion to sinners. Dsm Insights, the webinar, is envisaged to fulfill this threefold task. Dsm Insights is a special program organized by the SALES Resource and MERMIER Center in Hyderabad, in association with the General Secretariat for Social Apostolate and Innovative Ministries in our congregation. I take this opportunity to thank Father Suresh Babu, the Director of DSM, and the General Secretary for Formation, and Father J. Stephen, the Director of DSIFMA, and the General Secretary for Social Apostolate and Innovative Ministries in our congregation. On this day, I am honored, I'm privileged, and I'm delighted to declare our webinar, DSM Insights, inaugurated. A cordial welcome to all of you to this webinar. Please stay tuned once in every 3 weeks and on the special days in our MSFS calendar for this webinar. Have you heard of 3 men who died on the same day and went up to heaven? One was a Baptist, the other a Catholic, and the third one a charismatic. All 3 of them showed up to heaven, and they were at the gate of heaven, and St. Peter saw them, and Peter said, please wait, I need to get your rooms ready. And meanwhile, Peter contacted Satan and asked him whether he could take care of them for some time while the rooms are ready. So these 3 men were with Satan. 2 hours later, Satan called Peter and said, Sir, I can't handle them anymore. The Baptist is saving everyone. The Catholic is forgiving everyone. And the charismatic is raising fund for air conditioning. All 3 of them had relevance and influence where they were. Today, we focus on the relevance and influence of St. Francis de Sales in our modern times. You know that we live in a world of internet, Instagram, Twitter, tablet, smartphone and Android phones. We live in a culture where the information technology is exploding with thousands of TV channels and 1 billion websites in our living rooms. The sexual revolution today is radically changing the way we look at our lives, our commitment, marriage, family, priesthood, and religious life. Political and religious conflicts and extremism divide people and countries based on race, color, caste, tribe, and nationalities. Faith and church attendance are sharply declining. And there are more and more people who are unsure of what they believe in. And the pandemic, COVID-19, is taking us to a new world where we have not lived before. So we are in such a situation. We need something solid to hold on to. We need wisdom. We need an ideology. We need a roadmap. We are not bad people. We are sincere people. And we seek something solid for us. We seek the wisdom. We seek the roadmap. And the relevance of St. Francis de Sales is that he provides us with a roadmap. Very simple roadmap for our faith journey. He provides us with a roadmap that anyone can follow. Not only the monks and priests and religious and bishops, even lay person, a housewife, a farmer, a soldier, a businessman, whoever or whatever state of life, Father, St. Francis de Sales has a roadmap for you. And that's what makes St. Francis de Sales makes relevance and influential today for everyone. What is the roadmap that St. Francis de Sales offers us in our faith journey in this confused world? It is the spirituality of the heart. St. Francis de Sales brings to our attention that there is an innate inclination, inbuilt desire and longing for God in our hearts. Our hearts are always longing for God. He speaks about this longing for God that is inside each one of us. In his treatise on the love of God, the first book speaks about this inner appetite in every human being for God. Not only St. Francis de Sales, most of the secular thinkers and spiritual writers, poets and philosophers, novelists, romantic stories, dramas, they all speak about this deep longing in every human heart. Don't you experience in your own heart sometimes that something is missing in you? A nagging feeling that something is missing. A feeling of restlessness, a feeling of loneliness, a feeling of emptiness, a feeling of incompleteness. This is inborn, inbuilt in us. And all these writers and spiritual secular writers speak about this. Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychology, spoke of this fire, this emptiness, this longing in our hearts as a longing for pleasure. He said there's a fire, unquenchable fire in us that is pushing us outward in relentless pursuit of pleasure. And for Freud, the fire that is burning in our hearts is primarily for sexual pleasure. Carl Jung, another psychologist, spoke of this restlessness or this untamable energy in us as something looking for finding meaning and purpose in life. Erik Erikson spoke of this restlessness in us as the restlessness or longing for an identity for ourselves. We want to have an identity for ourselves. C.S. Lewis spoke of this restlessness, this emptiness, this longing, this appetite in us as an old ache that will not go away. And it is not meant to go away. And it is too great a longing in our heart that according to him, only God can fill in that emptiness, can satisfy that longing. So Augustine spoke of this restlessness. He said, "Oh God, you have made us for yourself. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." St. Francis de Sales spoke of this longing as a longing to belong to God. And for St. Francis de Sales, our holiness is in discovering this deep longing in us and accepting that this longing is to belong to God, accepting that only God can satisfy the deepermost longing in my heart. That is holiness. And St. Francis de Sales uses various images in the treatise on the love of God, especially in the first book, to speak about this tremendous attraction between human heart, human spirit, and God. It's like the attraction between pieces of iron and magnets. He uses these images to demonstrate how our hearts are constantly longing and longing for God, desiring and desiring for God, yearning and yearning for God. He uses the example of a mother who is nursing her baby. Her breasts are full of milk. Her breasts are swelled with milk, engorged with milk, and she's in abundance. But the baby, with great appetite, drinks the milk, and the baby is satisfied, is contented, and she is relieved. In the same way, Francis says, Theotimus is anyone who has devotion, who has a longing for God. Theotimus, God in his abundance is giving us that milk of love. God gains nothing by letting us drink from his love, but we are satisfied, we are contented. Francis de Sales uses another image, the image of eagles. He says eagles have very strong wings. They have a strong heart, but their eyes are more powerful than their hearts and wings. Their eyes are able to see far beyond when they are flying. They have a very sharp and clear vision. In the same way, when our human desire, human longing is invigorated and inflamed, we have a clear vision. We have sharpness to see how lovable God is. Through this longing, we are able to see how lovable God is. But our wounded human nature does not allow us to move forward, to go forward and be satisfied with the love that God is giving us. Again, Francis de Sales uses the example or the analogy or the image of palm trees. Palm trees, if they are not planted in warm places, they do not produce delicious fruits. They produce imperfect fruits. They produce tasteless fruits. But if they are planted in a warm place, they produce delicious dates. The same way, because of our wounded human nature, we are not able to produce delicious fruits because our will is weak. Our will is paralyzed by the wounded human nature. This is something very important for us, very relevant for us. And Francis de Sales uses the example of the man, the paralyzed man in the Gospel of John, chapter 5. This man was paralyzed for 38 years. He could see the healthy pool outside, but he could not jump into the pool because he was paralyzed. In the same way, because we are paralyzed, we are able to see the goodness of God. We are able to see how lovable God is, but we are not able to jump into God's love. This is a challenge for you and for me. We have a longing for God. We have a desire for God. We see how lovable God is. Our hearts are longing and longing to belong to God. But because of our wounded nature, we are not able to love God above other things. This is a challenge Francis de Sales places before us. You know, there was a recent survey, a research made by the Gregorian Institute of Psychology in Rome, and they have come up with a conclusion. 60 to 80% of priests and religious, they are wounded and they are blocked and influenced by the blocks, emotional and spiritual and psychological blocks inside of them, that they do not have the inner freedom to internalize the values and ideals of priesthood and religious life. 60 to 80% of seminarians are influenced by their emotional and spiritual blocks, that they are not able to internalize the values and ideals of priesthood and religious life. This is a challenge in formation. This is a challenge in ongoing formation. We have a longing. We know how lovable God is, but we are not able to jump into God's love. And Francis de Sales gives us the hope. Are you willing? Are you ready to allow God to pull you using this natural appetite in you? Are you willing to use your natural inclination, this longing in your heart, to allow God to draw closer and closer, to draw you closer and closer to Him? Are you willing to give the permission to God to pull you closer to Him so that you can be attached to Him? This is the relevant spirituality that Francis de Sales offers to us. Are you ready? Are you willing? God is waiting to pull you closer and closer to Him. God is waiting for you to jump into His divine goodness and His divine love. Thank you very much. God bless you, and live Jesus.